for today comes from 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. As we continue to look at the life of Samuel and many of the characters in his life. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do." Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. Well, today, as the sermon title says, we're going to talk a little bit about growth and change. I think one of our favorite subjects in church, right? I think we recognize that we need to grow, we need to change to remain relevant in the world. But then there's also the old joke, how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb? And that's where you guys say, "I don't know how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb." Okay, everybody ready? So, how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb? We don't need to talk about change. All right? Change is difficult, isn't it? Even though we know that we need to do it in an ever-changing world, it is difficult. And change is probably most difficult in a church like this, where we are pretty stable, really. You know, people come in and some people go in different paths in life, but really we stay pretty stable. And, you know, we don't have a ton of money in the bank, but financially we are getting by. Even when we had that major expense of a boiler, God provided ways to get that done without really having major changes in our church. So we are a stable church, and we have a great service, don't we? We have great things going on at church, and that makes it hard to want to change, because we like things the way we are. But we also must recognize that we can't have everything our way all the time. Sometimes we have to change, we have to adapt things to remain relevant in just a crazy world. But we also need to recognize that a lot of great things have gotten us to this place in life. So we cannot just cast aside all the things of the past either. So as I've thought about change over this last week, I thought a little bit about just after high school, about wanting and recognizing the need to change and grow in my world. And I realized that more schooling wasn't something that I wanted to do. I realized also that just going to work day after day was not the growth and change I was looking for. So eventually I found what I believed was the answer to growth and change for me when a couple of bikers traveled through town, and they had a plan. They were traveling across country. They were going to see the country and make a fortune. So that was something I could get behind. That was the change and growth I could see. I could see the world and become rich. So shortly after they'd been in town for a while, they said, hey, why don't you come with us? I didn't have a motorcycle, but they were okay with me hopping in my car and going after them. So we took off. Texas was going to be the next leg of their journey because this was like February, and February in the Midwest kind of stinks on a motorcycle. So we were Texas bound. And it turns out after we got to Houston, Texas, it didn't take too long for me to find out that impulsive change is not necessarily the right way to find growth and change in life. It wasn't long, and I realized I just couldn't find a job for whatever reason. My car broke down, and my money was quickly running out. So after a few weeks, I realized I just needed to pack up and head home, finding out that a cross-country trip with a couple of bikers who wanted to make a fortune but had no real plan to make that fortune was not going to bring growth and change to my life. You know, I think growth and change are God-given things we all desire. They are things planted in our heart, but we recognize that growth and change, those desires of our heart, must come in the right and proper and godly way. And the lesson we received from the book of Samuel today on growth and change is that we must seek God's will when it comes to growth and change. Recognize that God is going to allow us to go the way we choose. God gives us free will, but that comes with a grave warning. For when we seek to grow and change in God's way, even though it's hard, even though it is difficult, if we seek proper growth, proper change in life, amazing blessings await us. For blessings come when we trust in God for all things. When we look to God for our comfort, our strength, and as our guide, lasting growth and true godly change will follow. For God blesses us when we move forward in the world. When we recognize that God is always calling us to move towards the bright, exciting future we have, willingly embracing those things, we remain a blessing for our community and our world. So last week, if you were here, we looked at Samuel as a young boy who was called by God to go to Eli and call him out because of the wickedness he allowed his son to run in, and his failure to bring proper correction to them. So Samuel has now done what God called him to do. He has gone to give that warning to Eli. And then after that time, the Ark of the Covenant has been stolen by the Philistines. And while that was stolen, Eli's sons are killed, just as it was born. The shock of those events caused Eli to stumble and fall, resulting in his death, just as it was foretold. And then the Philistines find after a time that stealing something that contains the power of God does not go well for them. Chaos and havoc take over them, so they send the ark back to Israel with many gifts as kind of an atonement for their wrongdoing. So as all this is going on, Samuel is growing from a young boy into manhood, and he continues to be a prophet for the Lord, calling out people and acting as a faithful judge to bring correction for many years. And now by the point of chapter 8, many years have gone by. Samuel has gone from being a young boy to an old man. It says he is at that place that Eli was before, where he is now trying to train up judges to eventually take over everything for him. And he does something that's actually a little bit unique when he chooses judges, because he selects his son as the judges. So, and he sends them then to the southern city of Bathsheba. And what's unique about that is typically judges were called by God through a divine appointment. God made it clear who the judges were to be. But Samuel decides he knows a little bit better than God, and he appoints his son to those positions. And we know that typically it goes pretty well for you when we think we know better than God, right? So, we see that again, going against God's will causes havoc in the world. And so these judges now, his sons have been in position long enough, they gained the reputation. The people begin to understand that they are not acting as servants of the people. They are not doing the wise guiding and correcting, but rather they have used their positions to gain their own power, their own authority, and their own selfish desire. Verse 3 tells us, they turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. They see the opportunity to become wealthy, and they take it. They've not followed the godly example that Samuel gave to them. While Samuel turned towards God for guidance, his sons see the opportunity for exploitation and personal gain. They've corrupted what is supposed to be a holy position, willingly selling their justice. Their main concern is their own personal comfort and gaining worldly wealth. Just as his sons haven't learned their lesson from Samuel or Eli before him, Samuel clearly has not learned his lesson either, as Eli was held accountable for failing to give his sons proper guidance. Now Samuel will soon find himself in a very similar position. Certainly, those of us that are parents know that we cannot control every action our kids do, but it is our job to give them wisdom, to guide them, to show them the best way, the godly way to live as we send them out into the world. And Samuel has failed to do that. He's failed to correct his children when he has seen wrong. And Samuel is a little bit unique as a judge as well, because Samuel has gained kind of an exalted, a national status among the judges. Typically, all throughout Israel's rule under the judges were in control of a specific region. And they had this control and autonomy to rule that region as they saw fit. And then there were other judges all over the place with essentially equal power. But now Samuel has risen in prestige, so he's got a little bit more clout than the other judges. And then so these other elders, they band together to bring their concerns before Samuel. They see the way things are going, and so they band together to bring their concerns before Samuel. And they recognize that Samuel's family is not going to be the solution to their problems. They recognize that he is broken with the godly way of choosing judges. So they come bound together to bring correction. And they're pretty blunt in the way they bring it about it. They just go to Samuel and say, look, you are an old guy. You are getting old, and your sons are horrible, horrible people. Even though, it's difficult to hear, even though I think if most of us heard something like that, it would probably kind of turn us off. They're just blunt and honest. And sometimes that is the way we have to do things. As I said, as I've thought about my friend who passed away and my mentor, one of the things I loved about him was he was just honest with me. If he saw me, maybe not getting things right, he didn't sugarcoat it. He just honestly corrected me and helped guide me. And that is what it takes sometimes. So these people say, look, you're getting up there in years. You're not going to be around very long, and we do not like your kids in charge. So they press forward with their plan, and they show, as they're talking to Samuel, that they really want to shake things up. They don't want just a little bit of change or new judges. They want radical change. You know, just as I decided to make a radical change in my life and hop in my car and shoot down to Texas, they want radical, sweeping change. They want to look like the other nations before it is too late, before Samuel's gone and his wicked sons can rise to power. They want a complete directional shift. They don't want just new judges to replace his kids. They want a whole new system of government. Israel wants to look like the other nations and have a king rule over them. They fail to recognize that they already have a king. They have the one true king. The God of all creation is that to be their only king, but they want to change up even that. They want to have a man placed in a position reserved for God alone. They believe a human is the solution for the things that only reliance on God can fix. So they willingly throw away everything they have in the desire for that which they are looking to become. And that for us too, as we talk about growth and change, we must recognize, as I said, that we cannot abandon all the things that got us to where we are. Just as we can't cling too tightly to the things of the past, we cannot be too quick to cast them aside either. For moving forward and true growth and change to happen, we must recognize that we have had an amazing place for over 160 years. And so, as the Israelite people, as the elders come before Samuel, and they tell him, "You're old, your kids are horrible, and we want to change up the whole system of government," Samuel is understandably not too thrilled about that. He sees it as a personal betrayal against him, and also a turning away from God's desire. While he's upset, though, rather than just say, "Nope, we're not doing it, I'm in charge," he goes to God in prayer. He gets something right. He sees